The morning of my 28th birthday, I came downstairs to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded, the way she does when she's already decided something and just needs you to agree. My stand mixer was gone. I noticed it before I even noticed her. The corner of the counter where I kept it, the heavy-duty 6-quart one I'd saved 4 months for, was just empty. A clean square of nothing where $800 of equipment used to live. "Mom," I said, "where's my KitchenAid?" She looked up at me and smiled. Not an apologetic smile. A patient one. Like I was about to ask a question she'd already prepared an answer for. "Your sister needs it," she said. "She's doing the desserts for her engagement party." I stood there in my pajamas staring at her. "That's my equipment. It's in the family kitchen," she said. "We all use it." I want to stop here and make something clear, because this matters. I had never, not once, used anything that belonged to my sister for my work. I had my own tools, bought with my own money, stored in the back room I'd converted into a baking station when I moved back home 2 years ago to save money while I built my business. The KitchenAid was mine. The 3 sets of professional cake pans were mine. The offset spatulas, the bench scrapers, the silicone molds I'd ordered from a specialty supplier in Chicago. All mine. I'd labeled every single thing with a small piece of blue painter's tape and a black Sharpie because I knew from the moment I moved back in that I had to protect my inventory. My name, in my own handwriting, was on the bottom of that mixer. My mother knew that. She just didn't care. My sister's name is Adele. She's 24, 4 years younger than me, and she has always been the one my parents worried about, which meant she was also the one they fixed things for. When Adele struggled in high school, my parents got her a tutor. When I struggled in high school, my mother told me to read the chapters again. When Adele dropped out of community college after 1 semester, my parents said she just needed to find her path. When I took a gap year to work before culinary school, my father sat me down and gave me a speech about ambition. I don't say this to be bitter. I say it because it's the context you need to understand everything that happened next. Adele was engaged to a guy named, and I am not making this up, Ford. Ford with a capital F. Ford like the car. Ford who wore boat shoes in November and referred to my baking business as my little hobby. They'd been together for 8 months. The engagement party was in 2 weeks at my parents' house, and apparently Adele had volunteered to make 200 macarons, a 3-tier naked cake, and a dessert table that she had shown me on Pinterest approximately 11 times. Adele had never made a macaron in her life. She had, however, watched 3 YouTube videos about it. I told my mother I needed the mixer back. I had a client order due Friday, a 40th birthday cake for a woman who had paid me a $600 deposit and was expecting fondant work that required me to start the buttercream that afternoon. My mother said, "Can't you just do it by hand?" I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said, "I can't do it by hand. That's why I spent $800 on a machine." She made a face. The face she makes when she thinks I'm being difficult. "You're being dramatic. Adele just needs it for the week. You can have it back after the party." "The party is in 2 weeks. "Well, she needs to practice." I went to the back room. I want to say I was calm. I wasn't. My hands were shaking when I pushed open the door and turned on the light. My bench scrapers were gone. My good set, the stainless steel ones I'd bought at a restaurant supply store in Nashville when I was doing a weekend workshop there. My silicone molds, the ones shaped like flowers that I'd used in my portfolio photos, that I had specifically used to land 2 wedding clients, were gone. The cake pans were still there, but someone had stacked them wrong. The non-stick ones nested inside each other without parchment between them, which scratches the coating, which ruins the surface, which means every cake you pull from that pan from now on has a faint texture it shouldn't. My cake pans that I had not put away wrong were now ruined. I walked back into the kitchen. "Where is the rest of my equipment?" My mother had her phone out. "What rest?" "My bench scrapers, my silicone molds." "Mom, those molds cost $240. Where are they?" "Adele borrowed a few things," she said, not looking up. "She needed to set up a practice station." "Where?" She finally looked at me. "In her apartment. She doesn't have a lot of counter space, so she took my things to her apartment." My mother's expression shifted into something I recognize very well. It's the expression she gets right before she says something that reframes the entire situation to make me the unreasonable one. You know, she said, your sister is going through a very exciting and stressful time. Her engagement party is important to our family. I would think you, of all people, would want to support her. I was 28 years old. I had been baking professionally for 4 years. I had built a client list from zero, designed my own website, filed my own business taxes, and spent every spare dollar on equipment that I used to generate income. I was not a hobbyist. I was not playing around in my parents' kitchen. I was running a business, and my mother had just handed pieces of that business to my sister without asking me. I need those things back today, I said. I'll talk to Adele. She didn't talk to Adele. I called Adele myself. She let it ring through to voicemail. I texted her. She sent back a string of heart emojis and said, "Can we talk about this after the party?" "I'm really stressed, Ran." I called again. She didn't pick up. That night, my father came home and my mother had apparently already briefed him, because the first thing he said to me when he walked in the door was, "I hear you're upset about the baking stuff. Adele has my equipment at her apartment," I said. "I need it back. I have a client delivery on Friday." My father set down his work bag. He has this way of exhaling through his nose when he's gearing up to say something he knows I won't like he's preparing himself. "She's your sister's," he said. "I know she's my sister. She still took my property without asking." "It's not." He stopped, started again. "You live here and your mom and I let you use this kitchen for your business. Rent-free. I think a little give and take is reasonable." There it was. I had heard variations of this my entire adult life. The implication that because my parents did something for me, let me live here, paid for something once, helped me out at some point in the vague past, I owed them a permanent surplus of compliance, that I was always running a deficit of gratitude, that any boundary I drew was evidence of selfishness. "Letting me use the kitchen doesn't mean Adele gets to take my tools," I said. "She'll bring them back." "When?" "After the party. My client order is Friday." He looked at me with genuine bafflement, like I had said something in a foreign language. "Can't you just figure it out? Borrow something? Your mom said you could do it by hand." I went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed and I did the math. The $600 deposit from my client was already spent on ingredients, on packaging, on a new set of food coloring gels I'd ordered last month. If I missed the delivery, I would have to refund the deposit. If I refunded the deposit, I would start the month $300 in the hole after expenses. If Adele had my molds for 2 weeks, I would also miss the Henderson wedding consultation, where I was supposed to bring portfolio samples made specifically with those flower molds because the bride had seen them on my Instagram and asked for that exact design. I sat there and added it up, and I realized that my family had just cost me, conservatively, about $1,500 on my birthday. Without asking, I called my friend Rosalind. She's known me since college and she is the person I call when I need someone to tell me I'm not crazy. "You're not crazy," she said. "Also, happy birthday. Should I call the police?" She was quiet for a second. "I mean, technically. She took your stuff without permission. That's theft. She's my sister." "She's your sister stole your work equipment." I didn't call the police that night. Looking back, I think I should have at least filed a report, not necessarily to have Adele arrested, but to have documentation. A paper trail. Something official that said, "These items belong to me, and they were taken without my consent." But I didn't do that. I kept thinking about my parents' faces, my mother's voice saying she's going through a stressful time, and I told myself maybe it would get resolved. It did not get resolved. On Wednesday, 2 days before my client delivery, I called Adele again. This time she picked up. "Hey," she said, like everything was fine, like we were just catching up. "Adele, I need my mixer and my molds back by tomorrow." The cheerfulness drained out of her voice. "I told you, I need them for the party. The party is in 12 days. I need them now. I can't just, I have practice batches in the middle of everything." "Adele." I was very calm. I remember being proud of how calm I was. "I have a client delivery Friday. I cannot do the order without the mixer. I need it back tomorrow." A pause. Then, Can't you just use mom's hand mixer? My mother has a $15 hand mixer from Target that she bought in 2009. It is designed for things like scrambled eggs and pancake batter. It is not designed for stiff meringue buttercream. No, I said. This is so typical, Adele said. And then I got the speech. The speech about how I always make things about me, how I can't just be happy for her, how this is the most important thing that's happening in her life right now, and I'm being difficult about a kitchen appliance. How she's stressed and overwhelmed, and I knew that, and I was still doing this. I hung up. Then I called my parents' landline and I told my mother that if the equipment wasn't back in this house by tomorrow night, I was going to file a police report for theft. My mother gasped, actually gasped. You would do that to your own sister? My sister took my work equipment without asking. I told her I needed it back for a client order. She refused. I would do that. Your father is going to be devastated. Tell him to talk to Adele. I am almost certain my mother called Adele the moment she hung up with me, because 20 minutes later my phone rang and it was my father, and he did not sound devastated. He sounded furious. He said I was threatening my sister over kitchen supplies. He said I was making Adele's engagement about myself. He said that he and my mother had given me a home and support, and this was how I treated them. He said the word ungrateful approximately 4 times. I let him finish. Then I said, Dad, my equipment is worth over $1,000. I have a paid client order I cannot fulfill without it. If Adele doesn't return it by tomorrow, I'm filing a police report. That's not a threat, it's a fact. He hung up on me. I went to bed. I did not sleep. At 7 in the morning, my mother knocked on my door and said Adele was bringing the stuff back after work. Adele arrived at 6 p.m. with my mixer in a tote bag and 3 of my molds stuffed inside the bowl. The 4th mold, the largest flower set, the one I used most, was not there. I couldn't find it, she said. Where did you last have it? She shrugged one shoulder. I think maybe I left it at Ford's place. I stared at her. My sister was standing in my parents' entryway, holding my KitchenAid by the handle, hair in a messy bun, looking vaguely inconvenienced, telling me that a piece of my professional equipment was maybe at her boyfriend's apartment. She wasn't sure. Get it back, I said. I'll look for it. I took the mixer and the molds upstairs. The bowl had dried macaron batter crusted around the edge that she hadn't cleaned off. 2 of the molds had burn marks on them. She'd put them in an oven that was too hot. Those molds were not technically ruined, but they were discolored in a way that meant I couldn't use them for portfolio photos anymore. I cleaned everything. I started my client order at 7:30 that night and finished at 2 in the morning. I met the delivery on Friday. The cake was beautiful. The client sent me a photo and said it was perfect. The large flower mold never came back. Adele said she looked, but she couldn't find it. My mother said maybe it would turn up. My father said I should let it go. $240 of molds, and I only got back the lesser ones. I let it sit for a week. I needed to think clearly, and I cannot think clearly when I'm furious. I made my deliveries, I answered my client emails, I paid my expenses. I ran the numbers again, and I came up with $1,800 as the real cost when I factored in the discolored molds, the scratched cake pans, the missing large mold, and the Henderson consultation I'd had to reschedule. Then I found a place. I hadn't been actively looking, but Rosalind's neighbor was moving out of a 1-bedroom in a building 3 miles away, and the rent was $1,400 a month, which was a lot. More than I had been paying, which was nothing. But I had been adding to my savings every month for 2 years, and I had just over $9,000 in a separate account I called my equipment fund. I'd been building it specifically to eventually move into a commercial kitchen or my own space. I decided the equipment fund was going to fund a different kind of move. I put down the deposit on a Saturday without telling anyone. I signed the lease with a move-in date 4 weeks out. I said nothing. In those 4 weeks, I kept baking. I kept doing client orders. I was polite at dinner. I answered my mother's questions about my day. I watched my parents' behavior with new eyes, the way you can see things more clearly once you've already decided to leave. I noticed that my father referred to my baking business as your thing in every conversation. I noticed that my mother talked about Adele's engagement party. Now 3 weeks out, constantly, and had not once asked me if I needed any help with my work. I noticed that no one in my family had said anything about the missing mold, the ruined pans, the client stress, or the $1,800 I'd absorbed, so Adele could make practice macarons. Nobody said sorry. Nobody offered to replace anything. Nobody acknowledged that anything had been taken from me at all. I started moving things out slowly. A box of personal stuff here, a bag of clothes there. My books, my extra set of baking sheets that I kept in my room closet. I was quiet and methodical, and I timed things so I was always moving things when my parents were out. 2 weeks before I was officially supposed to move, I rented a cargo van for the day. The back room, the one I'd called my baking station, held everything. I packed every piece of equipment I owned with the same care I would use shipping it to a client. Mixer in its original box, which I'd kept in my closet. Pans wrapped in dish towels and packed flat. The good equipment, the professional equipment, the equipment I had bought myself, labeled myself, insured myself through my home-based business rider. I loaded the van. I made 3 trips up and down the back stairs. It took 4 hours. My parents were at Adele's apartment, helping her set up centerpiece displays for the engagement party. I had known they would be. When the back room was empty, I stood in the doorway for a moment. Just stood there. There were little rectangular marks on the shelves where the pans had left imprints in the dust. The outlet where I plugged in the mixer was empty. It smelled like sugar and cardamom, the way it always had, and it already looked like a room that used to be something. I drove the van to my new apartment. I unpacked. I set up my baking station in the second bedroom. A real second bedroom, not a repurposed closet. And I put everything exactly where I wanted it. I labeled everything again, fresh tape and fresh Sharpie, even though here there was no one to take it. I went back to my parents' house that evening to get the last of my personal things from my bedroom. My mother was home by then, and when she saw me carrying out my lamp, she stopped me in the hallway. "What are you doing?" "Moving out," I said. She looked at me like I'd said something in a foreign language, the same look my father had given me over the mixer. "What? Where are you going? When did?" "I signed a lease 4 weeks ago," I said. "I move in officially next Saturday, but I've been clearing out my things gradually. I wanted to do it quietly." She stood in the hallway with her hands clasped, and I watched her cycle through something. Surprise, then the beginning of hurt, then a pivot I recognized, the pivot toward reframing. "Is this about the mixer?" she said. "It's about a lot of things," I said. "Sweetheart, this is an overreaction. Your sister just needed." "Mom." I stopped her. "Not unkindly. Adele took my equipment. You told us okay because I live in your house. Dad told me I owed you because you let me use the kitchen. Nobody said sorry. Nobody replaced what got ruined. Nobody even acknowledged that it cost me anything. And when I tried to protect my own property, Dad called me ungrateful 4 times in one phone call." I picked up my lamp. "I'm not overreacting. I'm just done." She called my father from the hallway, and I heard him come in the front door, and I heard them talking in low voices, and I finished carrying things to my car. My father came to find me when I was doing my 3rd trip. "You can't just leave," he said. "I can," I said. "I have a lease. This is your home." "It was," I said. "You made it pretty clear that living here had conditions I wasn't aware of." He looked like he wanted to argue but didn't have the words. My father is good at being angry and not very good at being wrong. I finished loading my car. I said goodbye to both of them. I told them I would still come to Adele's engagement party because I had already RSVP'd and I was not going to create a scene. My mother looked like she might cry. My father stood with his arms crossed. I drove to my apartment. The engagement party was 2 weeks later. I went. I ate the food. I congratulated Adele and Ford. I was polite to my relatives. Adele's macaron display was beautiful, actually. She'd figured it out, or someone had helped her. They were on a tiered stand with little flower decorations. The flowers were made with my mold. The large one that she'd said she lost. I looked at that display for a long moment. Adele caught me looking. She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "I found it," she said. "I see that. I was going to return it. After the party," I said. She looked away. "I'm sorry," she said. It was quiet and quick, like she was trying to get it over with, and I could tell she had practiced it. practiced how to say it in a way that would end the conversation. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it, and I also knew it was the kind of sorry that didn't include returning the mold or replacing the ones she'd damaged, or acknowledging that what she'd done had cost me money and stress and sleep. My mother found me by the drink table an hour later. She pulled me aside. "I want you to know," she said, "that I'm sorry for how this all happened. I didn't think about your business. I was thinking about the party." "I know," I said. "I hope you're not going to let this. I hope you'll still come to family dinners. I hope things aren't going to be strange between us." "I'll come to family dinners," I said. "I would appreciate it if you would ask before borrowing anything of mine going forward." She nodded, but I could tell from her expression that she didn't entirely think she'd done something wrong. She thought the situation had gotten out of hand, which is different. My father came to find me before I left. He had his hands in his pockets, and he didn't look at me directly when he spoke. "I shouldn't have said ungrateful," he said. I waited. "You worked hard for your equipment," he said, "and we should have asked." "Thank you," I said. "Are we good?" I looked at him. He meant it as a real question, I think. He genuinely wanted me to say yes, we're good, and for that to mean that we had repaired something between us. "We're working on it," I said. He nodded once, and I could tell he didn't love the answer, and I also didn't change it. I went home to my apartment that night, and I made myself a cup of tea, and I sat at my new kitchen table by the window. I could see the parking lot of the strip mall across the street, a nail salon with a lit sign, a few cars pulling in and out. Not a beautiful view, but mine. A week later, I got an email from my client. The one who'd ordered the 40th birthday cake, the one I'd finished at 2 in the morning after Adele finally returned my mixer. She was asking about her daughter's quinceañera. She wanted a 5-tier cake. She wanted those flower details she'd seen on my Instagram. The quote I sent her came to just under $2,000. She booked it the same day. I went to my baking station, my real one, in the second bedroom of my real apartment, and I pulled the large flower mold off the shelf. Adele had dropped it off the week after the party, tucked inside a canvas tote bag left onto my parents' porch with a sticky note that said, "Sorry, EXO." No replacement for the damaged molds, no reimbursement. Just this one thing returned, finally, after all of it. I cleaned it, dried it, set it on the shelf. I had my work, I had my space, I had a $2,000 booking and a full calendar through March. That was enough. That was more than enough. And for the first time in 2 years, the space I was standing in belonged only to me.